President Knapp, it is my privilege to introduce to you Julian Bond for the degree of Doctor of Public Service.
Julian Bond, you were born in Nashville and raised in Pennsylvania. You graduated from Morehouse College with a degree in English. While still a student, you were a founder of the Committee on Appeal for Human Rights, the student civil rights organization that directed 3 years of nonviolent anti-segregation protests that won the integration of Atlanta's movie theaters, lunch counters, and parks. In 1965, you were elected to the Georgia State Legislature, but the House refused to seat you because of your public opposition to the war in Vietnam. You fought your case all the way to the United States Supreme Court. As part of that effort, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. organized a march in support of your right to be seated. The Supreme Court ultimately voted unanimously in your favor, and you went on to serve 10 terms in the Georgia General Assembly, 4 of those in the House of Representatives and 6 in the Georgia Senate. During your service in the General Assembly, you were a sponsor or co-sponsor of more than 60 bills that became law. You waged a successful 2-year battle in the legislature and the courts to create a majority black congressional district in Atlanta and organized the Georgia Legislative Black Caucus, then the nation's largest. In 1998, you were elected chairman of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, the NAACP. You also served as the first president of the Southern Poverty Law Center, and as a member of the boards of People for the American Way, the Council for a Livable World, and Harvard Business School Initiative on Social Enterprise. In the course of your extraordinary life, you have met resistance with courage, and your commitment to civil rights helped transform the American landscape. For all the foregoing, the George Washington University hereby confers upon you the degree of Doctor of Public Service with all the rights, duties, privileges, and opportunities pertaining thereto. Congratulations. Ladies and gentlemen, our commencement speaker, Dr. Julian Bond.
It is a great treat for me to share this stage with Chuck Manette. He and I go back more years than we want you to know. And with Stephen Trachtenberg. My father was a college president, and my heart went out to him when he was here, and President Knapp today. You live in a big house and beg for money. To President Knapp, members of the faculty, parents, family members, friends, most important, graduates, it's a high honor to have been asked to speak here today. Ceremonies like this one inevitably call to mind my first commencement, my graduation from high school many years ago. The speaker then was the late Mordecai Johnson, then the president of Howard University. He spoke without notes in the hot afternoon sun for more than an hour and a half. As I listened, I thought, someday I'll get the chance to do that. Luckily for you, it isn't today. It is, however, the occasion for congratulations to you and reflections from me. I am the grandson of a slave. My grandfather was born in Kentucky in 1863, and because of that, freedom didn't come for him until the 13th Amendment was ratified in 1865. He and his mother were property, like a horse or a chair. As a young girl, she had been given away as a wedding present to a new bride, and when that bride became pregnant, her husband, that's my great-grandmother's master and owner, exercised his right to take his wife slave as his mistress. That union produced 2 children, one of them my grandfather. Your presence here today attests to the value you place on education and your willingness to make sacrifices to obtain it. The same was true for my grandfather. At age 15, barely able to read or write, he hitched his tuition, a steer, to a rope and walked 100 miles across Kentucky to Berea College, and the college took him in. When he graduated from Berea 13 years ago, the college asked him to deliver the commencement address. He said then, "The pessimist from his corner looks out on the world of wickedness and sin, and blinded by all that is good or hopeful in the condition and progress of the human race, bewails the present state of affairs and predicts woeful things for the future. In every cloud he beholds a destructive storm, in every flash of lightning an omen of evil, and in every shadow that falls across his path a lurking foe. But he forgets that the clouds also bring life and hope, that the lightning purifies the atmosphere, that shadow and darkness prepare for sunshine and growth, and that hardships and adversity nerve the race as the individual for greater efforts and grander victories. Greater efforts and grander victories. That was the promise the generation born in slavery made a century and a half ago. That was the promise the generation that won the Great World War for democracy made 6 decades ago. That was the promise made by those who brought democracy to America's darkest corners 5 decades ago. And that is the promise you must seek to honor as you leave these ceremonies and enter the world beyond. You graduate at an historic time and in an historic place. 45 years ago, more than 250,000 people gathered here on this mall to march for jobs and freedom, and to hear the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King tell the nation of his dream. Black people's passage to this country was on slave ships. Their passage to citizenship occurred on that day and in this place. I then worked for the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, better known as SNCC, as their communications director. My organization was founded only 3 years before the march and was the youngest sponsoring organization. The National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, whose board I chair today, was the oldest organization, dating back to 1909. As a representative of the youngest sponsoring organization, my job at the March on Washington was to bring Coca-Colas to the movie stars. My most compelling memory of that day was giving a Coke to Sammy Davis Jr. and having him say, "Thanks, kid." The first speaker that day was the 74-year-old labor leader, A. Philip Randolph, who devoted his life to jobs and freedom. The march had been his idea, and he later called it the most beautiful and glorious day of his life. The last speaker, of course, was Dr. King. His speech that day cemented him and the Civil Rights Movement in America's consciousness. It was also here in Washington, at the National Cathedral, where Dr. King, on March 31st, 1965, 5 years after the March on Washington, and 40 years ago, delivered his last Sunday sermon. 4 days later, he would be assassinated in Memphis. He now has been dead longer than he lived. Today, we've encased the man and the movement in myth. As King biographer Taylor Branch recently said, to see King and his cohorts as anything less than the modern founders of democracy, even as racial healers and reconcilers, is to diminish them under the spell of myth. I hope, graduates, that as you contemplate what you receive when you are handed your diplomas, you will think of these modern founders of democracy and of the tens of thousands of others who experienced the tragedy and the triumph that is the history of our national struggle to come to grips with the unresolved problems of race. And I hope you understand that this struggle has everything to do with you. When the Supreme Court outlawed segregation in 1954, a vast army of nonviolent protesters rose up to challenge segregation's morality as well. Students like you began embracing jail without bail when they sat down to stand up for their rights. They attacked segregated interstate travel with their bodies and segregated ballot boxes across the South as well. Through this period, the federal government helped only reluctantly, and then only when white property or people seemed to be at risk. State and local governments worked in active concert with white terrorists, and the movement had few allies. But from the first, it was a people's movement, made up of ordinary women, ordinary men. The cumulative acts of their passive resistance became our modern democracy's finest hour. By 1965, Jim Crow was legally dead. A voteless people had voted with their bodies and their feet and paved the way for other social protest. The anti-war movement of the 1960s drew its earliest soldiers from the Southern Freedom Army. The reborn movement for women's rights took many of its cues and much of its momentum from the Southern movement for civil rights. Most of those who made the movement were not famous. They were faceless. They were not notable. They were nameless. They were marchers with tired feet, protesters beaten back, unknown women and men who risked job and home and life. As we honor the graduates today for what they have achieved, so should you honor them for what they achieved for you. They helped you learn how to be free. They gave you the freedom to enter the larger world, protected from its worst abuses. If you are black or female or gay, their struggles prevent your race or gender or sexual orientation from being the arbitrary handicap today that it was then. If you belong to an ethnic minority, if you are disabled, your ethnicity or disability cannot now be used to discriminate you today as it was then. If you are Catholic or Muslim or Jewish, your faith cannot be an impediment to your success. And as you grow older, because of what they did then, you will be able to work as long as you are able. Your job, your responsibility, is to make these protections more secure, to expand them for your generation and those who will follow you. In doing so, you will make Dr. King's legacy live. Our future as a nation depends on our willingness to continue to reach into the racial cleavage that defines American society and to change the racial contours of our world. Wherever you go from here, if there are hungry minds or hungry bodies nearby, you can feed them. If there are precincts of the powerless poor nearby, you can organize them. If there is racial or ethnic injustice, you can attack and destroy it. By this ritual today, you're about to be officially enrolled in an elite within our nation, the community of educated women and men. As you go forward, we hope you will all do well, but I hope you will also do good. I hope you place interest in principle above interest on principle. An early attempt at ending illiteracy in the South developed a slogan that was also their motive: each one teach one until all could read. Perhaps your slogan could be, each one reach one. Each one reach one till all are registered and voting. Each one reach one till all are productive citizens of our world. Each one reach one until your problem is mine and mine is yours. Just that it is not enough to not do evil, it is not enough just to do good. It may be helpful to think about your task in this way. Two men sitting by a river look and see to their great shock a helpless baby come floating by. They rescue that child, and to their great horror, another baby comes down the stream. When that child is pulled to safety, another baby comes along. One man jumps in the river a third time, and the other begins to run upstream. "Come back," says the man in the water. "We have to save this child." "You save it," says the running man. "I'm going to find out who's throwing babies in the water, and I'm going to make him stop." Now, racial minorities serve society like the canaries that miners used to carry to warn them when the underground air was becoming too toxic to breathe. But too many people today want to put gas masks on the canaries instead of taking the poison out of the air. Too many want to put life preservers on the babies instead of stopping them from being thrown in a dangerous, treacherous stream. As you aspire to greater efforts and grander victories, You must be prepared to offer not just love, but justice. Not gas masks, but pure air. Not life preservers, but an end to throwing babies away. None of this is easy work, but you know what hard work is. That is what brought you here today. I urge you to continue to be your best, to apply your talents, not just to bettering yourselves, not just to doing social service, but also to bringing social justice. The possibilities are immense, and so are the rewards. Historian Howard Zinn wrote that the Civil Rights Movement proved that even if people lack the customary attributes of power, money, political authority, physical force, as did the black people of the Deep South, there is a power that can be created out of spent-up indignation, courage, and the inspiration of a common cause. It is a phenomenon recorded again and again in the history of popular movements against injustice all over the world. Not to believe in the possibility of dramatic change is to forget that things have changed. Not enough, but enough to show what is possible. We have been surprised before in history. We can be surprised again. Indeed, you can do the surprising. The reward for participating in a movement for social justice is not the prospect of future victory, it is the exhilaration of standing together with other people, of taking risks together, of enjoying small triumphs, and enduring disheartening setbacks together. If my grandfather were here today, I think he would ask now, what have you done with your freedom? Somebody someday will ask you, what did you do with your education? Be sure you have an answer for your family, for your nation, and for your world. They are counting on you. Congratulations.